I do want to switch real quick to the Timberwolves. If you don't have any more Thunder thoughts, but this is a team where we talked about it. People got on them for the swing for Rudy. They got on them for the swing for Julius Randle, and now they are back in the Western Conference Finals, second time in 2 years after only making it to that stage once in the first 34 years of franchise history. They're in an interesting spot, though, because I do think that they have a lot of questions that need to be answered. Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker are going to try and get paid this offseason. Julius Randle might try and get paid this offseason as well. He also has a player option. Is Rob Dillingham taking the keys from Mike Conley? Don't even think he's that type of player. So I do think that having Anthony Edwards going into his age 24 season, learning how to be a superstar, is a pretty good starting point. But where they go from there is very intriguing, but I trust Tim Connolly to figure it out.
Yeah, that's it. The Wolves are in an interesting spot because they do have a lot of players on their roster that have value, that they could move those guys around, and other teams would want just about every player that you just said there. Like Rob Dillingham obviously didn't get a chance to prove much this year, but I still think there are plenty of teams that would be willing to take a swing on a high upside player like that. And then, when you talk about Nickeil, he's had a great series. Julius Randle is someone who was really playing well at the start of the playoffs, and the Thunder kind of stopped going to like double big, and they putting smaller guys on him, and all of a sudden he's struggling a little bit more, and he's been up and down, some single digit performances, some 20-point performances. You're not really sure where you're getting out of him in this series. The Rudy Gobert thing is like always been kind of a handcuff for the Wolves, just because you're never going to get the return that you feel like is equal to the value that he can bring to your team. At least like that's the way that I perceive it. And I think that's a major reason why obviously KAT was the one that ended up getting traded instead of Rudy, because they probably aren't fielding very many offers that return them valuable things for Rudy Gobert. But I do trust that with Anthony Edwards at the head of the snake and enough talented pieces around him that they will continue to build a contender around him. But after coming up short in the Western Conference Finals 2 seasons in a row, it would be pretty shocking if they don't try to make some level of change. And I know they just made a big change last year, but like coming up short again, like they're probably really feeling like, okay, we just came up short twice with Anthony Edwards, as young as he is. We need to get this right by the time that he is in like what is the perceived prime of your career in the NBA, which is, anywhere from 28 to 31. He's still got a couple of years before that. But with a player as talented as he is, ahead of schedule the way that he is, like I would be pretty shocked if they don't try to mend the roster and tweak it a little bit to try and make sure that if this team does get back to the stage again next year, they're a little bit more well-equipped, because this is back-to-back years now where, they beat Denver last year, which was an insane series. That was like 3-0 and then, nearly blew it and then, had a major winning game set. Like that was a weird series. But then when they got to the conference finals, it kind of felt similar to this year, right? Where like it became evident pretty quick that Dallas was the better team and Dallas was going to be the team that was moving on. And yes, they were able to have that blowout win when they finally got back at home. And yes, they easily could have won that last game and tied the series. Again, speaking going into Game 5 tonight, but it really feels like the writing is on the wall that they're going to come up short. And there's nothing wrong with that. Back-to-back conference finals appearances is very impressive, but it just again shows there is a cap, there is a ceiling on this team right now, and they're going to have to do something to switch that up to make sure that if they do get back to the stage, that they're good enough to get over the top and get to the finals.
Last parting thought on the Timberwolves is that I think that Anthony Edwards being so young, and at least I think they're winning enough to where I don't think he's the type that'll be impatient, like, oh man, I ain't gotten over the hump yet, all this stuff. This is year 5 for him. But I think that what they're kind of doing a little bit, especially in this stage of his career, is a little bit of experimentation that, okay, what kind of team do we need to build around Anthony Edwards? Like, what's the best type of big situation? What's the best type of backcourt situation? Somebody floated out the idea, not necessarily Andrew Nembhard specifically, but a Nembhard type player where it's like a lead guard who doesn't necessarily need the ball. But I think they need somebody who, again, Mike Conley is just older, but they need somebody to be comfortable enough handling and setting Anthony Edwards up to when he can, when he's getting guarded the way the teams like the Thunder are guarding him. So I think that what the Timberwolves are where they at right now is just, once they get off this Rudy Gobert contract or whatever it is, because Anthony Edwards will still be pretty young when that happens. And I think back to why Dallas won, right? Like Dallas made those moves in the margin where we didn't really think that, bringing in Gafford or bringing in PJ Washington was going to move the needle as much as it did. But it was like, man, Luka needs to have rim protecting lob threats with him. He needs to have shooters around him, and boom, profit. And now Anthony Edwards, who, depending on where you rank him after this run, is probably comfortably in the top 10 in players in the NBA, and maybe even approaching the top 5 at his young age. It's like, okay, he's going to get better. It's going to be harder to limit him the way the Thunder are right now. Enjoy it while you can. He's going to get to a point where he's maybe even more unstoppable, but we need to have X amount of shooters around him, X amount of lob threats, X amount of cutters, or whatever it is. I think Jaden McDaniels is the perfect guy to have next to him. 1, because Anthony Edwards just loves him, but 2, he locks up. He fits in, prototypical guy for this day and age. How good can he get? And thinking about all those other things. So it's really intriguing to see what Minnesota does. I think it's hard to kind of be patient about that because, you feel like you're wasting years, but in reality, these years are real learning processes, especially as things in the Western Conference, which is unforgiving, kind of get sorted out and figured out.
Yeah, that's the toughest part too, right? It's like the East, the picture. Well, I mean, now that Tatum tore his Achilles, it's a little bit more murky with what the future of the East looks like, because it felt like Boston was set up for success for so long. And obviously they're going to have to make changes this offseason as well, so that clouds the entire future of the East. But like with the West, it's cloudy in its own way in that it really does feel like anything can happen any year. And it's pretty crazy that Minnesota was able to get back to the conference finals again this year, especially after trading KAT and making those moves and everything. But it clearly feels like they've found something that works. Like you said, between Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, and obviously Rudy Gobert's, I just pulled it up. He has another year on his contract, and then it's a player option, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. So we're talking 3 years down the line potentially at that point. But Dante DiVincenzo's under contract. They still got Nazarito as a player option this offseason. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like you said, unrestricted free agent. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they decide to bring him back or not. Julius Randle also has a player option this offseason. So there's some flexibility there to change up this roster, but still keep the core intact in the core being Anthony Edwards right now, Jaden McDaniels, and then Rudy Gobert, because that's who they're stuck with. And I mean, I say that like it's so negative. Like it's, Rudy Gobert's not hurting you at this point. He's just, as we've seen, he's super limited in what he can do, especially in the playoffs. So, they have flexibility. They have talented players they can trade. Terrence Shannon Jr. has had a pretty solid series. Maybe they can find something in him and giving him a bigger role next year. But, again, it feels weird to talk about this team like they're already done when they're not yet. And they might be by the time that you hear this. But, they're going to have to take a look in the mirror and say, all right, how do we maximize this time around Anthony Edwards? Because coming up short twice in a row is solid. It's good to get there. But, if, again, they get back, it's got to be to get over the hump and get to the finals.
And perfect way to end this right here. I'm putting you on the spot. As we look back, I guess 8 months after the fact, who won the trade? If they both bow out the same stage of the playoffs.
Man, because it felt like at the time, right? Like it was so definitive that the Knicks got the better end of that deal. Is it a win-win? Is it or lose-lose?
I think so.
Is it just a net neutral? Because I don't know. All right, I'm gonna answer your question with a question. Which team is set up for? I guess the answer is the Wolves, just because Anthony Edwards is so young. But which team would you say is more set up for immediate success in the next, let's call it 3 years after the trade?
So I think that immediate success. I still think the Knicks have some more flexibility to make the moves. But I think that this move, obviously, it was to get from under KAT's contract. And that's what the Timberwolves knew, that they weren't going to be able to be flexible enough to win when Ant gets into his prime, like we talked about. So, it was a long-term move that ended up having bigger benefits. So there's an element of surprise where I don't think anybody would have expected the Wolves to be back at this point. But I think that when the Knicks did that, especially after the Bridges deal, I think that they kind of, in an unconventional way, got to where we expected them to get. But the Timberwolves, I do think, surprised a lot of people, and are playing with house money a little bit. So I think in that sense, it is a win-win. It was funny. People were really harsh. I would go back and I'd probably give it a B- for Minnesota at this point, and for New York, maybe just a B, just because it didn't fix what the biggest thing was. You didn't get over the hump to be a title contender. But, getting to the conference finals is really hard to do. Only 4 teams do it. So I'm not trying to poo-poo on that at all. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting that just popped into my head is if you were to reverse it, if you were to just reverse engineer the trade and let these teams run it back, are the Knicks still in the conference finals? Are the Wolves still in the conference finals?
I don't know. I don't know about the Knicks.
Shoulder
Man.
shrug.
I don't know about the Knicks. I don't know. I don't know about the Knicks just because, and I was having this conversation again at work last week. But just the fact that the similarities in because they're both lefties and because they both kind of play a methodical game in what Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle need to do as far as operating on the floor, I think that kind of cut it. Because remember, we didn't see Julius Randle last year. He had the shoulder injury, so he wasn't a part of that magical Knicks run. So I do think that they might have just kind of gotten in each other's way, and that might have just limited what they were capable of actually doing. But Minnesota, I might even be more confident in them right now with KAT just because of what he's done and the way they were able to win. I don't think that they have any issues. They might even sweep the Lakers if they have KAT. I know they wouldn't have DiVincenzo either, but same thing, especially if things shook the way that they shook against the Warriors in that series. Even with or without Steph, I think that could have gone either way. So I do still like the KAT. I feel like they had just figured it out, and then we didn't get a chance to see it any more than we did anymore. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. And as we wrap up here, we're talking New York, Minnesota. Thanks for checking out NBA Sound System Canada on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe below and find us wherever you get your podcasts. And on Instagram, we have weekly episodes and bonus content throughout the week.